So after 23 years of absence, Morocco, north of Africa, last week rejoined the African Union. This is despite resistance from some member states over the status of Western Sahara. However, research analysts at Exotic Partners with headquarters in London believe that although Morocco has rejoined the African Union, it is still very tied to the EU. Very difficult to say goodbye, isn't it? So let's talk to the head of research at Exotic Partners, Hasnain Malik in Dubai. Good afternoon, Hasnain. It's good to have you coming through to us on the show. It's always very difficult to say goodbye, isn't it?
It is, and the debt, the ties that still exist macroeconomically between Morocco and the EU, they're very substantial. You know, about 20% of Moroccan GDP is made up of exports to the EU, remittances from the EU, and foreign direct investment from the EU. And that's a legacy of many decades of very close relationship. If you look, though, at the risks to that relationship and the value of that relationship going forward, they're obviously very clear when you think of the election cycles this year in France and Holland, in Germany, and potentially in Italy as well, and what that means for the concept of the EU and the growth story of the EU. That's a challenge. If you look at the fact that Morocco presents a low-cost manufacturing alternative to a number of southern European states who, in response, actively lobby against granting Morocco further free access to the European markets for its exports, it's only natural that Morocco looks elsewhere. If you look at the other candidates, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, has been an area that Morocco has focused on historically. Clearly, that area is in a very different environment with much lower oil prices. And then very naturally, Morocco starts looking south and westwards, south and eastwards. So it's not surprising that Morocco is making much more diplomatic effort and commercial effort to engage with Africa. And in that sense, the readmission, the rejoining of the African Union is part of a process that's been underway for some time.
So I'm sure for those of you who are analysts, what you'll be crunching right now, what's the road ahead for Morocco in a kind of a homecoming for the rest of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is specifically speaking, for this very important economic powerhouse in North Africa. What's your reading at Exotic Partners on this homecoming?
I think there are a couple of things. The first of all, I would say that from a macroeconomic perspective, it's still going to be a long time before the commercial reality catches up with the diplomatic rhetoric. So if you look at the amount of Moroccan exports to the rest of the African continent, at the moment, it's only about $1.5–2 billion per annum. That is a long way to grow, but that'll take many years. If you look at the actions, secondly, of Moroccan corporates, actually some of the largest Moroccan corporates, particularly the ones listed on the market, like Morocco Telecom, like Attijara Wafa, the largest bank, like Adoha, the largest real estate company, those have been engaged, particularly in Francophone Africa, for some years. I mean, if you look at Attijara Wafa, about 20% of its banking assets are in Africa. If you look at Morocco, about over 35% of their cash flow comes from Africa. So the Africa story is already a major part of the investment discussion for those stocks. If you look at other companies, the question now is, I think you'll see more engagement from Morocco at a top political level, more at a macroeconomic level, and that will filter down to a number of the companies on the market. You know, we already hear the likes of, for example, Marsa Morocco in ports, the likes of Managem in mining, who are exploring more and more opportunities in, as I say, particularly Francophone Africa.
Very interesting, and I'm looking at your report here about how Morocco's stocks continue to outperform so far this year Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Egypt, and even Kenya. It looks like a very interesting story. Walk us through this.
Sure. So, I mean, if you look at the performance of the Moroccan local stock index in dollar terms, so if you think about this from a foreign investor's point of view, in dollar terms, that market is up almost 50% in the last year. And if you look at valuations now on the stock market in Morocco, particularly for the larger stocks, those have always been high because there is, if you like, a captive domestic pension fund industry that has to invest in those equities. But even relative to its own history, Moroccan index valuations are edging that 3 times level. I think if you look going forward for the Moroccan story, We are in a very healthy GDP growth outlook environment this year. We're looking at about 5% growth after a weak harvest last year. If you look at current account deficit, it's only about 1.5%. That's nothing to worry about. If you look at fiscal deficit, this was a number that was up at 7-8% in 2012 and is now around 3%. That's great. The challenge is that as we begin to see two things. One is recovery in a market nearby, which is Egypt. With Egypt's devaluation, with greater credibility for Egypt macroeconomic policy under the IMF agreement, that could end up drawing funds out of Morocco, particularly from the foreign investor perspective, and into Egypt. And then the second issue is you'll have a few more macroeconomic risks ahead. There's one which we've already mentioned, which is the EU. The second is the fact that oil prices have obviously doubled since where they were, from where they were a year ago. You also have an issue that really over the last 4 or 5 years, Moroccan tourism is held up very well, continuing to contribute around 8 to 10% of GDP. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that according to third-party estimates, there were 1,000 Moroccan nationals who were part of foreign fighters involved in the arena of Iraq and Syria. As the Islamic State is gradually curtailed in terms of the amount of territory it occupies, if you see some of those fighters re-emerge in Morocco, that could be a risk to the tourism sector. So our view very much remains for foreign investors. It's been without doubt a more stable market alongside the likes of Egypt and Nigeria over the last 2 or 3 years, but maybe some of that shine from a relative standpoint will come off now.
Very interesting and action-packed conversation there. Thank you very much, Hasnain Malik, for those insights into the numbers, the valuations, the market, the GDP numbers, and the outlook for Morocco. Thank you very much from Dubai. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Back at home, and finally, what type of shoe am I wearing? You're looking at the local manufacturing sector for quality footwear. So we have a Nigerian entrepreneur, Babajide Ipaye, who is creating a brand with a social brief about what you are likely going to wear.
Nigerian entrepreneur Babajide Ipaye has always been a sneaker fanatic, but when he was 18, at shoe size 48, he couldn't find a shoe he liked that fit quite right. Years passed. He studied microbiology at the University of Lagos and worked in the tech industry. And then in 2015, as he turned 40, he decided to make his own shoes. Ipaye is the creator and founder of Keeks, an Africa-inspired quality sneaker brand.
What we've started with is this style, which I designed whilst I was studying in the Netherlands. And it's formed like a canvas. When I mean a canvas, I'm talking about a plain board or a piece of paper where you can paint stuff on. The Keeks brand is actually an Afrocentric brand.
The sneakers are produced in Netherlands, where he studied innovative shoe production, but designed here at his office in Lagos.
I need to check out those footwears when I'm going jogging the next time. I got a local brand to put my money and put some FX back here in my pocket. Do have a great day, everyone. Whatever you're wearing, wear Nigeria next time. I'll see you again.